All right, I think we're ready to go. Bob.
Fantastic, Ruben. How are you, man?
Good man. Nastan, how you say it? Nastanovich?
Nastanovich, and yeah, it's just like pretty much exactly the way that it's spelled. So yeah, you did a great job. You're Ruben Zarate, right?
That's right. That's right.
As opposed to Zarate, which
Yeah.
you're kind of like too. You know what I mean? That actually got a nice ring to it. Ruben Zarate. Sounds like a box.
I
You
think
have a
there
great
was a I
boxer
think there
name.
was I think that was a boxer's name.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, were you? Are you? You don't strike me as a pugilist yourself.
No, I've never boxed, but
Me neither. That's
yeah.
why I'm so handsome. You know what I mean? That and good clean
um
living. You know.
exactly. Yeah, I asked a few people on Instagram for questions and
Yeah.
it kind
Oh,
of
look,
and it
I
kind
gotta let the dog out. He's moaning at me. Mr. Ghost
Oh,
is
okay.
very bossy, so this will actually be helpful.
All right, good.
Dog goes. Dog goes. He does all the
Bob
tricks
is
in the book, Ruben. Where are you? Do you have a pet yourself?
no, I never pet myself.
Oh, okay. You saying you never pet yourself? Or
Did
you
you
said
ask
you
me?
don't have a pet yourself?
I thought you asked me if I pet myself, and I said
No,
no.
no, no, no.
Actually, I
That's
don't.
crass, Ruben. You know, it's a little early. It's only 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, let's kind of keep the crass behavior to a minimum here. You know, like
No,
you know,
I have a Pomeranian Chihuahua mix.
hmm.
Yeah, cute little dog.
Is that a male or a female?
It's a male. He's about 13 now.
Oh wow,
He's getting up there, but he's sweet.
yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. What's
What
his
kind of
name?
dog? Oh, Logan.
Yeah, and that's your best man, huh?
Yeah. He's a good dog. What kind of
Yeah,
dog
and
do you have?
you live in Los Angeles?
Santa Barbara. Pretty close.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Yeah,
How far
same
is that
thing.
from like? How is that where you grew up?
Yeah. Born and raised.
Yeah, and what's up with Dante? You say it Dante Elephante, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was we couldn't think of a band name and the original bass player, his girlfriend thought of it. And we're like, "Shit, that's better than anything else we could think of."
I mean, it works. It's pretty memorable.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And
Yeah.
it's fun, you know. Like it kind of like from what I've listened to a handful of songs since you got in touch with me. It just kind of fits the vibe of the music, which is just kind of like rock and roll, like just like fun rock and roll, you know.
Yeah,
With like a
totally.
sense of humor, you know. Like seems like you guys are having a really good time,
Yeah, it's been really fun. I've been doing it for like 10 years.
and you've
This
done well. You've done not that I don't mean to say that like in a, in a surprise tone, but like I
We're
just
doing
know
okay.
so
Yeah.
I know so many bands that like are really really good that unfortunately don't really get any kind of opportunity. So it's great that you guys. What's the name of your label again?
Don't have one.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you did.
Exactly.
Right.
Lollipop in Los Angeles released our first album. It's always like, per album. I haven't been signed to like a multi record deal
Yeah,
or
never
anything.
signed anything, but I'm saying, we never like none of the bands I was in actually ever signed anything.
Oh, okay, good.
I mean, actually after the band ended, you signed stuff, but like during the thing back then, like if you had worked with cool people who were your age, and we were very fortunate in that regard with Pavement and Silver Jews and all the record labels that we worked with, they were kind of like-minded people who were sort of starting at the same time. So like we're not dealing with like what you always sort of envision as like this rock and roll creep. You know,
Totally.
I mean, obviously, like that's. I mean, maybe we'll talk about that climb. Oh, but actually, you're the one who's conducting the show, so
Well, we could talk about whatever you want, but I was gonna.
I always like to get because like um, I always sort of like to try to make it a point to like kind of get to know who I'm speaking to, and how old are you now?
I'm 30.
Okay, perfect. And like
Yeah.
obviously, like I want to ask you this because I put a lot of thought into this. Okay, like
Okay.
I'm 52. I'll be 53 in a few weeks, and I live in Des Moines. So, obviously, I live in a place where, in a good year, like 10 sort of really exciting musical things happen a year, and like sometimes you can't go to all of them, but ideally, like 10 nights a year, there's something to do. Now, where in your area, like just like when I lived in New York, I lived in New Jersey and had access to New York and Hoboken.
Hmm.
But I mean, there's things going on. Like you technically could go out like 100 nights a year and see things.
Yeah, if I want to drive to LA, I can do the drive. It's only an hour and a half, so
Yeah, but I mean, like, so
yeah.
like, and obviously you guys play. How often does Dante Elephante play out?
Let's see. Pretty often. Like we did like 2 national tours last year,
So you're
and
pretty busy. So like,
yeah.
I'm kind of happy that you did those last year. Was this supposed to be an intermediary year for you guys? Were you gonna like work on new stuff?
No, I was about to release stuff.
Okay, so
So
this
I
is
was
what
like,
I'm asking you. Like, so like, obviously nothing like this happened during what I'd call like the prime of my life, like you're going
yeah,
through now.
yeah.
Okay, so like I just described to you, like I might go out 6, 8 times a year to see live music in this town, and a handful of road trips, and then usually I find myself at some point being involved in some like 7 to 10 day tour with bands that I've
Mm-hmm.
put out on my little label, Broker's Tip, and
Mm-hmm.
my friend Lucy, who actually lives in LA, Lucy Arnell, and I like to go on tour with her. She's a lot of fun, and so this is the point of my life. I'm not saying it's like the winter of my life, but in terms of like from like a end of life perspective, like from like a in the midst of like kind of like the sort of the greatest years of my life as a music fan were like essentially like 15 to 35,
Oh
and
yeah.
like and obviously when I was 33 when Pavement ended, and then I'd spent a lot of time doing that. So kind of want to do something else, but like it's right in the middle of like really like your band's been around for 10 years.
Yeah.
You love live music, you love to listen to records, like
Yeah.
live music is an irreplaceable thing. Like you can't you can watch sports on TV, or you
Well,
can
now we
watch
can.
movies on TV. You don't have to go to a movie theater. I mean, like all of those things can be. I mean, obviously, like we'd all rather see it on the big screen, but like at this day and age, like movies, TV, sports, everything can actually fit like a quarantine type situation. Obviously, reading. There's a lot. Just about every form of entertainment that we indulge in, we can essentially do at home, with the exception of live music. I don't think that can be recreated during a pandemic, and it causes me great concern that like I've got two really cool nephews that are 25 and 21. So just like you, like this is like a year out of your lives that you'll never get
Oh
back.
yeah.
You're supposed to be going out and seeing like discovering new things, seeing old favorites, seeing your friends' bands play, like going to see like maybe your three favorite bands since you were like a kid that might be coming through LA at some point. It just
Totally.
like so I kind of feel your pain. So like I mean actually like I was actually planning on going to like the main music event here in Iowa every year. Is this pretty cool festival that we have over in Iowa City called Mission Creek, and there's usually like 3 or 4 really cool acts from around the world that play that. Like unfortunately that was one of the first things to get pulled.
Mm.
Um and but generally like it's just I just wanted to ask you like how difficult has that been for you? Like have you turned sort of more inward to your own art, or like have you really missed, in addition to doing your own touring, playing your own gigs, like just all the nights that you won't have?
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely something I've thought about. Like I think I spent like all of March kind of like, who knows what's gonna happen? I'm just gonna chill at home. And then
Yeah.
after March happened, I was like, okay, this might be going on a little longer. So time to start writing again. Like, what am I doing? What can we start doing to keep pushing the message of this band? Like, maybe I should focus on merch. We can get get the store going to try and
Yeah, you
generate
pretty
some
much are
revenue.
like responsible for your own income at Dante Elephante then.
Totally, yeah. And
Yeah.
I own 100% of my streams, so I at least get my streaming money, which is fine. You know.
Yeah, like, and I don't, I usually don't check anybody's streaming numbers, but like, so would you say like in a good year, like Dante Elephante makes like maybe 5 grand off of streaming?
Yeah,
That's like a fair estimate.
yeah.
Okay, so anywhere between like $3,000 and $8,000. Like, obviously, if you put out a new album that was like, had a little bit of buzz around it, like those
Mm-hmm.
numbers would go up and stuff like that. So it is something. It does pay
It's
for
a
like your van and like your maybe
yeah,
a little bit of recording and like gear repair, and you
yep.
put your stuff on everything: Spotify, Bandcamp, Apple
Tik
Music.
TikTok.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, like, the thing is, like, it's
It
a thing.
works, yeah.
Like, people ask me about, this kind of thing, this whole streaming thing, and it's just never really something that I've ever had to think about because, um, I've never, I was never actively involved in bands during this streaming era.
Mm.
So obviously, like, pavement stuff that's all just like label things. It's all even over my head. I don't really even know if I don't even really, there's nothing on my pay statements when I get royalty statements that I can delineate how much money that I personally am making off of streaming. And, of course, Drag City, refused to participate in any of that until the
Mm.
last, if I had to guess, like maybe 2 or 3 years.
Mm.
All their stuff been available on Spotify and everything else. So, like, I guess I come from this sort of like really traditionalist background, and I do hear a lot of artists my age that are still going. I'm good friends with Janet Weiss from, Quasi, and
Mm-hmm.
formerly of Cedar Kinney, and like she complains quite a bit about the streaming. Like a lot of people, I read a thing the other day from that woman Nico K. So I don't know, like
Oh yeah.
bitching about streaming and stuff, and it's just one of those things that I just don't, that I don't. I mean, obviously, the label that I put out 507 inches by maybe 3 or 4 bands a year, and I try to sell them from my living room, and it's entirely nonprofit. And once I've retrieved the money, then that I put out, it usually costs like $1,300 or $1,400 with shipping.
Mm-hmm.
You have 507 inches made, then all the money goes. So if I sell like 250 records and like the last 250, like all the money goes to the bands because I don't want a cent. Like.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do the work, so, and so it's a very basic philosophy. Like normally, like the old school way to do it would be to split that money 50-50. But like at this point, I don't want to do that because so many bands like your band, I feel like they're kind of getting like sort of screwed in a sense. Like it's probably really hard to sell your product and your merch, especially when you can't tour. That's got to affect your
Yeah.
sales by like 80-90%. And I remember I've toured with several artists, including Max Solish, who's kind of defunct now, but he had this wonderful band called Dollfish, Dolfish, and he
Mm-hmm.
told me that like 75% of the money he made was like selling merch and records after shows. Is that still sort of the same way?
Yeah, I would say so. We sold out of all of our, shirts and merch on the road midway through a large tour last year. Direct support opening for someone else, and
Good.
that was awesome. But then, trying to get all of our merch back together and try to get the store up and running again has been tough because it's like, where is this money going to come from to manufacture these things, and a little worried
Yeah.
about that. But really, I think in
I'll
today's
share some tips with you. I've gotten some pretty good deals recently. Like I just got, I make things in very small quantities. Like these hats like this, I have them like 10 or 15 different colors, and they're decent. Like they're those like nice
yeah,
first caps. Like I get these for about $10 with all the printing and stuff on them. And but I found a really good deal. I'm just doing T-shirts for the first not time here at Broker's Tip, and like I got a really incredible deal on T-shirts, and they're good. They're good brands too, like Gildan, Super Soft, and Delta Apparel and stuff like that. So I'm kind of pleased with the deal. I kind of find deals with that kind of stuff. So I'll give you some once we get off. I'll clue you in.
wait, Bob, I can't
Maybe
hear you
maybe
now.
you say, oh, I can do better than that because you do it more often. But like
Yeah.
the other thing I wanted to ask you, like, so when your band plays in, let's just say hypothetically Portland, and how many people do you play for there? Like, do you play
Uh,
for?
Headlining, we sold out Bunk Bar. So what is that, like 200?
I was just there in January.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah. I did I was part of like a lengthy. Gail O'Hara put it on. It was like a tribute to David Berman
Oh, that's right.
on his birthday, and it was a bunk bar. And I'm actually happy that normally I would not be able to reference any West Coast venue, but I know
Yeah.
it very well because I spent 7 hours in there, and I thought the staff was lovely and the sandwiches were good,
Oh, the sandwiches
and
are
I thought
really
it
good.
sounded great. So you sell that out.
Yeah, we sold out last time we played there. And then
Are you still there?
uh, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You sell out bunk bar.
Yeah, we did that last time, and I think I played Aladdin or something. When I was doing the direct support tour.
So you
That was like at a theater.
you make decent money when you tour too now, right? Like
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I'm able to pay the band, and
Four
It's
people in the
fun.
band.
Yeah, it's about drums, bass, guitars, and keys. So there's like maybe 4 or 5, depending if I can get a key player or not.
And you just do it in one band. You jam a Kano.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yes, but if you're making like whatever 1,000, 2,000 a night, playing like 15 shows, then you guys come home with a profit.
yeah.
Yeah, you're
Some
doing good.
some tours it hasn't been that way, but things leading up to the last 2 years were kind of picking up. We did South by, we did all these things. We're very DIY. We're doing it ourselves here, but like,
Oh, you
yeah,
book your own stuff too.
I booked one tour, and then that led me to work with a big agency. But now I'm not on that agency anymore because my agent got promoted. So there you go.
Oh yeah,
And
that's just sounds so typical.
he does classic rock now, and I'm not
Yeah, those
classic rock
guys must
enough.
be really like freaking out because like they work hard, but at the same time they usually make pretty serious bank, and like it's a pretty fun gig to have, especially if you're well established.
Yeah,
They're also they're having bad years. I wonder what's your take on like obviously the gray area of using the words this time next year really sort of don't have
yeah,
meaning in this country at this point because it could be, God forbid, it could be worse.
yeah.
But so let's just say when Ruben's like 33, it's got to be sort of somewhat back to something that you would, some semblance of what it was in 2019 and before.
Yeah.
So, I
Well,
mean,
it's
hopefully
my
you don't have to
biggest.
wait that long.
Hopefully not, but my biggest fear is or my biggest concern is just trying to keep that momentum and maybe even getting away from the album, which I
Right.
think is right up your alley because you release singles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's
Singles are
like
great.
just putting out singles, maybe start featuring with other indie bands, which isn't like a thing right now. It's like it's so big in hip hop to have like so and so on this track, and now you're both cross promotion, and it's helping both of your brands.
Oh,
Where I
really? You
think,
thought about that kind of stuff? Interesting.
oh yeah, I think that could be very big if we end up all inside the house for another 6 months, maybe
Yeah.
even another year.
Oh, cool. I'm happy you have your finger on the pulse. And your bandmates, do they live close by?
I know my bass player lives really close, and I think our drummer's in LA, and then the lead guitar player is in Lompoc. So yeah, basically, it's all
Okay,
still.
but like collaboration, have you been able to do that this year, like via the internet or anything else, or like are you the chief songwriter?
Yeah,
I guess you're like the Stephen Malkmus of Dante. Elephante.
yeah, I guess so. That's
Yeah.
a big compliment.
Well, no, because I said of Dante Elephante.
Yeah, totally, totally.
Just
I ha-
kidding. I
I
just kidding.
met Steven once in Santa Barbara.
He's nice.
Yeah,
Nice
I
guy.
thought so too.
Yeah,
We
I can
bumped
imitate
into
him perfectly.
what happened?
Like I can imitate him perfectly.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it for you. Be like, yeah, I saw you guys like Dante Elephante. It's a cute name. I just thought it was cool. Like, I mean, it's poppy and everything, but like, nice rock. Like, you seem like you're having a really good time and stuff. So, I mean, I'm not gonna like crab it or anything like that. I would say keep doing what you're doing, and like, I mean, you never know what these kids are gonna like. So weird here, but like, anyways, do you know where I can get like kind of? I'm not like starving, but like anywhere I can get like walking distance, like a halfway decent burrito, like something like that, or you know. Anyways, the
That's
record shop's over there, pretty cool. Like, they,
yeah, I bumped into him at the bathroom at his show, and we locked eyes, and I was like, "I'm excited for your set," and he was like, "Oh, thanks, yeah, me
was
too."
that a Chicks or a Stephen Malkmus?
It was a Jix show, and he was like, "I'm excited to see you too," and I was like, "Okay," and he was like, "You know what I mean," and he like walked away. I was like, "All right, yeah, that was awesome. I'll
Yeah,
take it."
yeah, no, that sounds like brevity because like the people like I can understand like guys like that. I mean, I was the same way with like a lot of people. Well, I always just thought my attitude when I was like younger than you, and then even your age, and I
Yeah.
lived in Richmond, which was always had great music scene, and Charlottesville had a surprisingly good one. Thanks to this one booking agent, Maynard Sipe in
Hmm.
Charlottesville, you got a lot of great things there. And then, of course, living right next to Maxwell's and Hoboken and all the venues in New York for years, and then I moved to Louisville. So I've always kind of been in pretty vibrant music scenes, and so I've had the pleasure of seeing hundreds of my favorite bands, which has been sort of a great gift of my life.
Yeah,
And before I was even in bands, and of course you play with a lot of really great bands and stuff like that. So, but I would always be I wasn't the kind of guy that wanted to take up too much of their time. My general line would just always be like to go up to them, and say thanks a lot for coming, to Charlottesville, or thanks for
yeah,
coming here.
totally.
It really means a lot to like me and my friends that you guys have come here, and then like kind of like, and so like you'd have to be dealing with a real asshole if they were a jerk to you after that. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Because the last thing you wanted to find out was that a band that you loved, like, that they were a bunch of jerks, because then it would
totally.
affect the way you listen to their music, you know.
Yeah.
That ruined a few bands for me, but I'm not going to name names.
You don't have to name any names, but every
Yeah.
time I tell someone that story about meeting Steven, they always get like tense and they're like, "Oh, was he nice? I heard he could be." I was like, "He was cool to me. He didn't, we talked for 5 seconds, like." And
I
I
mean,
wonder,
generally speaking, with him, he would sort of, even if he was in a horrible mood,
yeah,
he would never take it out on a stranger.
totally,
And he thinks he was far more horrible than he actually was. I mean, touring, like, you've toured
yeah.
in arduous situations, and
Sometimes you have rough days.
yeah, I mean, the off days, you're irritated, you're not, I mean, obviously you're not sleeping enough, your eating habits are regular. I mean, the thing is, like, obviously, I don't want to complain about it because it's a glorious way to go through your 20s and 30s
Totally,
and beyond. And, I miss those days, like, sort of like not being in the lap of luxury and like doing it like in a really, really budgeted manner to try to make as much money as possible.
totally,
This is sort of like the pre-tour bus era Pavement, and no matter where we were in the world, we sort of did everything on the cheap because, um, because there's five of us and we wanted to make money. So, and you're together a lot, and every venue is a different experience, especially like if you've never been to them, and just the whole vibe, like the crowd. I mean, depend on so many issues. Like there's there's definitely tough times when you feel kind of miserable, but at the same time, it's obviously glorious. And then I remember Mark Eibold, especially, he loved touring for the most part, and he would always get what he called post tour depression, where you're sort of like
oh
back up,
yeah,
like the action sort of stops, and you're sort of like off the road. And then like for me, I never really experienced that because I would just sort of jump back into some other aspect of my life, like
mm.
that entertained me or something like that. And I mean, the only thing is that I remember like after the band stopped in '99, and that it would like going to see bands for the first several years, like having that feeling, even if the band was outstanding, that having this sort of weird feeling like it would be fun to be up there, be fun to be up there again, because like, on you just, and as corny as it may sound, I've said this several times, as corny as is a very corny thing to say, but you miss the applause, because like,
Yep,
n- like, and that's something that people should never underestimate, no matter who they are, whether they're great opera singers or athletes or even like indie rock bands that play for 80 people or 400 people, is that like there's not many things that most people get to do in their lives where there's enthusiastic people who like their art out there applauding
mm.
and cheering you on. And like in Pavement's case, since we were, especially in the early years, pretty erratic live, like actually cheering us on to do well, knowing that they could sort of like help a band that in a lot of cases was under practiced and unprepared, and in some cases inconsistent and underconfident musicians, when I refer to myself, because I never took the stage with too much confidence, because I was never meant to play music, really. I was sort of meant to be a roadie and a tour manager and all these other things. And then it became sort of clear to me right off the bat that that I should sort of participate. But I never, and I remember like being on tour with like, members of like Stereo Lab and bands like that had like classically trained musicians. And this band we toured with called the High Llamas, they had this one guy Dominic that was one of like the best vibraphonists like
Mm.
in the world, which is the instrument that if I could really choose one that I knew how to play, and like I'd love to be able to play that well. But I never trained, was never trained in any way, shape, or form in music. And like people say, "Oh, you're in a band, like we should jam sometime." And
Mm-hmm.
I said, "I can't. I can't. The only music I know how to play is like the Pavement and Silver Juice songs that I played on, and a few other things. I mean, like I can't really do much more than keep time, which I think is sort of advantageous in some regards. I think there's a lot of drummers that hit the drums too often. But
Yeah.
there's, but anyways,
Did you ever find that intimidating? Did Pavement or Silver Jews ever want to be that like super tight, polished rock band?
I mean, I'm sure that like, that's, you get two different answers, maybe five in that case. I
Yeah.
think if you talk to Steve West, he put an incredible amount of work into it. Yeah. So he did not want to get criticized. He wanted to be on the ball, and he's still very much a fun loving guy. Then Gary, in his case, Gary Young, the first drummer for Pavement,
Yeah.
he just he was a really good drummer, and he was just all he cared about was entertainment. So like the music was like equal to the entertainment. He was just a real showman, an alcohol fueled showman,
Mm-hmm.
which there was a lot more of back then, and like the era of rock in which he played, 78, 80s, and 90s. Like, yeah, I'm sure like in your generation, there's a fair amount of incoherence among the other artists, but like it doesn't seem like it's as like in the 80s and 90s there were just so many bands, even like famous bands that were like notoriously out of their minds. Like
Yeah.
obviously the Replacements come to mind, and Butthole Surfers, and you know Jesus Lizard and Scratch Acid. I mean, like you got like one of my biggest rock and roll heroes who actually lives in LA is David Yao from
Mm.
Scratch Acid and Jesus Lizard, and he's a wild showman. Like it seems like your generation of bands there's more of a concentration on like the music and sort of precision and like sort of getting it right, and like you maybe will have one or two beers during the show or something. You know,
Totally.
whereas people like back then were in a lot of cases, whether it was alcohol or something else, were generally could be out of their minds. I mean, obviously Guided by Voice, another band that obviously put away a lot of brewskis.
I think because my generation came after your guys's, that we saw you guys and how the other bands operated and maybe how they treated us when we were coming up, and they were kind of drunk, and we were like, oh shit, I looked at that and I was like, I don't really want to be like that, like the local bands, I guess I should say, the local bands that like let my high school band open for them, and
right.
yeah, and they're kind of assholes and dicks, and they didn't really go anywhere, they never really left Santa Barbara, so
They were kind of like these guys that thought they were rock and roll, but they were just kind of loser alcoholics.
totally, like right when MySpace was just starting. So you
Oh,
still
when
were like in
MySpace
your
was starting, yeah, MySpace. I skipped MySpace. My wife is she was on MySpace, but then I just missed MySpace, and I do
yeah,
the social media now, like a totally public platform, but like so basically, I mean, obvious, but I mean, like we were nice. I mean, the,
totally.
the bands were nice people. It's just that there was just more chaos involved, and there was more unpredictability, and
Yes,
even like sort of far out and interesting bands that I do see. It seems like there's a certain like you'd see like a band like Sun City Girls. You didn't really know who they are. You know, in the '80s, you didn't know who they were because they were like I saw them play one gig with like they were all wearing burlap sacks with like X's
mm.
painted on them and stuff. And there was a lot of really like there was a lot of performance art and music being played at the same time. Like things seem like when I do see a really good band from your generation, it seems that it's that they're just like really have practiced a lot and they're really on the ball, and they the music seems like a priority, and it's nice to see a combination act where like it's not like an artist, say for example, um, like Mitski or something like that.
Yeah.
She just kind of stands up there and plays, whereas then you see a performer like Cherry Glazer, she puts on a show. I mean,
Yeah, she's great.
she's a proper rock and roll showwoman, like, and that's a huge part of the entertainment. She sort of has like a bit of a kick-ass element, and I'm not saying like one's better than the other.
Totally.
Obviously, they do pretty far different forms of music. I do think it's been kind of good um, over the last several years in indie rock. That, in fact, I remember like it was just at a time about a decade ago where I thought there was this sort of like void in like women taking the helm and being sort of powerful in indie rock, and I feel like they've kind of like just like in sort of ironically in horse racing, that the female horses and the female bands have been quite excellent in a lot of ways compared to their male counterparts. And I'm not dissing Dante Elephante by any means, but it does seem like coming after a time like, whether it be like Courtney Barnett or
Yeah.
hundreds. I mean, like essentially, I find myself on my label generally putting out bands that are maybe not entirely female, but seemingly female led.
Totally.
And so I think that that's sort of encouraging, and in light of the.
Well, I haven't gotten tours because I'm a band full of all dudes. Quotes.
Really, so that does affect your business.
Yeah, it's effect, which is fine. Like that's what they
just
can
like
do.
Kick the biggest asshole out and replace him with a cool girl, dude.
I'm seconds away from doing that. Yeah, after this
I'm
year.
Just kidding, man.
But yeah, that's like something you have to definitely think about now, and I think it's good. I think there needs
the other
to be
thing
more.
That's freaky to me is that there's this one band that I put out their record. They're a fantastic band from Richmond, Virginia called Piranharama.
Cool.
And really good live, but like they play. They're kind of big in Richmond. Have you guys played in Richmond? Have you made it to Richmond yet?
Yeah, we played the Broadberry in Richmond.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. And you drew some people in there.
We opened, yeah.
Oh, cool. So yes. Richmond's a great rock and roll town, and so Piranharama's, they're the kind of band they play. They're kind of regional, but when they play, 6, 8, 10 shows in Richmond a year, they draw a few hundred people. And if it's a bigger deal, it's a bigger deal.
Yeah.
So they're kind of big in Richmond for what it's worth, and like I've been trying to hook them up. They've been trying to find a booking agent for a few years now because they'd like to do proper touring in at least the eastern half of the country. And the big the big negative is that there's too many of them. If you ever heard, there's that too. So like you're saying that like there's all these like booking agents that are from my era that are like in their 50s that I knew back then that I've been in touch with. I was like, oh, this guy, like I know him personally. Like maybe like you never really expect anybody in this industry to do you a favor.
Yeah.
And that's a huge generalization.
That's something you kind of learn though. Like you think like, oh, I'm gonna play this show for this guy, and then he'll get me back, and then they don't.
That never really happens. I mean, even like Pavement had sort of a glorious run where we had that whole like kind of critics darlings thing. We sort of always sort of maintained that, but like during like the Wowie Zowie era and the Bright in the Corners era, there was sort of this backlash. We went from being like this band for a handful of years that critics adored. So it was like kind of like a cyclical thing where it was like kind of like the cool thing for journalists to do was like diss the Pavement record. So even though like we thought the records were as good, it actually went so far as that you'd go see these semi-reputable music journalists at various concerts and festivals, and they would act like they didn't know you, whereas like 2 or 3 or 4 years before they were like essentially kissing your ass. And that was an unusual phenomenon. I found out like how insincere so many of them were, because I thought that you feel like you established like a rapport with them, like whether they like your music or not. And I'm not talking just like one or two. I'm talking about several, like in all parts of the world, UK and here in particular. So it is sort of interesting the way that works. But again, like Pavement was so fortunate. I mean, everything sort of fell into place. The music was so 90s, and like
Yep.
there's a certain amount of like void in um, in making music like ours with like our particular set of a few dozen influences, like kind of like just like all music, kind of like twisting it into your own
Mm-hmm.
thing off of your essentially like 20 to 30 to 40 favorite things that have effect on your songwriting. And I've never that's another major difference between you and me, Ruben, is that you're a songwriter. And like
Yeah.
so during this COVID-19 era, have you been able to, I don't know, what's your process? Do you write the tune first and the lyrics second, or is it a simultaneous thing?
If I get the chords going and I can get a little melody going, okay, then that's something. Either that's going to be the verse, or it's probably going to be the verse. I usually start with the verses first, and then
Right.
I'll do like a loop on the iPad on GarageBand,
Oh,
and
cool.
just
Yeah,
kind of start.
that's a useful. That's like a very basic and useful tool, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I just plug the keyboard in and just kind of get something going, and then build it out. Yeah, I'll usually spend
Yeah.
like 8 hours. And then 8 hours goes by and you're like, oh damn, I think I got something. I ignored everyone in my
And then
life.
when you really feel like you have something great, like especially with those guys, like so, like Malcolm, I'm sure did the same thing. Of course, Malcolm had to do more. He had to like he actually had to kind of like think of like the bass part and the drum part
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Because his bandmates were in other parts of the country, then we're essentially like just like the interesting thing about Silver Jews is that the early era of Silver Jews, at least, and I think it pretty much continued all the way through. Is David's the only artist I've ever worked with where he's a poet first and a musician second,
mm,
and so the music was built around the lyrics. The lyrics came first, so like you play with him and you just get handed maybe 15 poems or sets of lyrics, and you sort of read the poem and like kind of. It's a good thing Malcolmus was in the band back then because he's so good.
yeah.
And then all I did was really keep time, but and with a few other contributions and background vocals and keyboard noises and stuff. But like, um, it was fun to build things just around really formidable words. And Pavement was more sort of like what you're actually doing in COVID-19. So you're the main tunesmith, and like eventually at some point when you guys are able to get together on a more consistent basis, you're gonna have to ideally bring 10, 15, 20 song ideas to the table for the next
And
Dante.
then I'll trim it down.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Usually around like 9 to 10, 11 ish.
Yeah. Well, shoot
Yeah.
for the moon, I mean, like, you've got, now do you have a day job?
I was DJing.
Oh,
Like
no way. Like, at a radio
weddings at
station?
bars. No, like weddings, bars, and I do just all vinyl and yeah.
Oh, so nuts. Yeah, that's what I do too. But
Oh,
I've never,
really? Cool.
yeah, no, I do like a one DJ night a month. It's Des Moines, keep that in mind. Like, I do a DJ
Totally.
night a month, and then I would say throughout the course of the year, whether it be, I'd say I probably do like maybe 15 to 20 nights in Des Moines, and then at maybe 15 to 20 in other places. Like I'll go on tour with bands that I put out on Broker's Tip,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll play records before, after, and during their sets. Like what I mean, like ideally, a lot of clubs would be nice if they had like, I don't understand this
Yeah,
stuff.
tables.
Music these days, how come more venues don't have like a booth with like two turntables in it?
I know.
It's not that expensive.
And like and the ones I have, it's like they're always so shaky, and like 'cause
Yeah,
the
no,
bass is
believe me.
like
I've
rumbling, and you're like,
you
oh,
bring your own decks, so you bring your own
yeah,
decks, right?
yeah, I do, yeah.
What do you have? I just have those $250 like standard Audio Technica things.
I have
Good.
one. I have one Techniques S, or 210s,
1200,
1210s.
like a fancy one. I have one of those. It's really old. I would never think
Yeah,
that's too
I
important.
I got it at Amoeba for like $300,
No,
and
smart
it's
shopping.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then a new mark that we like. I have another like a cheaper
But
one.
that's just
So
like that's like those Audio Technica things. Like if you ever, if
I
you
was
ever
looking
break,
at those at first.
yeah, mine are great. They're the best. Like the best like $225 a turn.
Totally.
Yeah, they're good, and you can they get thrashed, but they keep on fighting.
That's awesome.
So you actually can do it. You can sort of like scratch out a living between Dante Elephante and doing maybe 50 DJ sets a year.
Yeah, and hopefully, I try to get one wedding every month, or maybe a wedding every 3 months. Like that could
Yeah, because wedding means over $1,000, right?
easy. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
fantastic.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially in Santa Barbara where it's wedding season all year round.
Well,
Well, it was, but yeah.
so are you sort of like now? Do you must play? You can't play like you must play a lot of music that generally isn't your favorite. Then like
Oh, that's when it becomes a job.
yeah, when you've got to
Yeah.
play like all the crap they want you to play, and like
Yes.
I mean you've
And
never
yet the
lowered
MC.
yourself to playing like like you've never lowered yourself to playing things like White Snake and
No, it's usually just like
Cherry
the new
Red.
hit.
You ever find yourself spinning Cherry Red by Warrant? Or
No,
Cherry Pie. No, Cherry Pie. I'm sorry, Cherry.
yeah. I've been fortunate not to
Don't Stop
spin any of the
Believing. You ever
'80s.
have to like dip in the Don't Stop Believing?
Oh, I played "Don't Stop Believing." Yeah,
Uh,
people. That's what they walked out to. One couple, they walked out of their wedding to that song because "Don't
uh,
Stop Believing" on their marriage.
and then
You know,
all you can hope for as the DJ is that while you're playing Don't Stop Believing is that they never breed.
that's yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
But not a lot of '80s hair metal. A lot of modern hip hop, which I'm not great on. So
No,
usually
me
like the
neither. I mean,
nights.
I know like I've got
So
my
I'm
favorites
just
and stuff like that, but like
I'm
no,
always just doing yeah.
yeah, there's so much of it. It it's amazing. It's just something that like I feel like I buy um maybe one or two things a year. There's so much there's so much great hip hop that I missed out on.
Yeah,
Deep and like reggae and dub and like I guess I do a podcast myself, but it's just an audio
that's
one.
right. I listened to it today.
Oh yeah, and we've done like 124 episodes. The last one I wouldn't listen to because it was a tough day.
Mm.
But I just don't make any sense really.
I listened to it. I wasn't sure if you had a couple beers and we're chilling and
I had a couple of beers.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
I,
one of those situations where I should have called it off, but then I didn't want to disappoint the guy, and like we only have the way our schedules align. Like it's only like 3 or 4 times a month, and like I was sort of I was in the sauce.
yeah, me and my cousin re-recorded a podcast like that, and I listened back to it the next morning, and I was like, nope, I'm not putting this out.
Well, see, I'm not in charge, and like he
Oh
is.
yeah,
Like, yeah, my wife, she was like, he shouldn't put that up, but yeah, it's just like I just document. I don't really care.
yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
I like that you guys put it on
my-
SoundCloud.
one of my friends told me in a very kindly way that she thought that I sounded over refreshed.
Oh, okay, that's a nice way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do like that you guys put it on SoundCloud, and you guys can put
The
like
next time, like somebody has to like bring you home, Ruben, when you're falling down drunk, and like they call you and be like, and you're like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. Like I was so wasted," and just say, "Did say no, you're fine, Ruben. You're just over refreshed. You're good." Yeah.
I think the culture has changed, like in like live shows where, with a lot of the Me Too stuff happening, like we can't get too drunk at these shows, and you have to. I'm constantly checking my bandmates, like, hey, like before a tour, I even told them like, no fucking around on this tour. Like we're here to play the show, get paid, make some fans, and leave. Which is maybe not something that happened in the past. Oh, it definitely hasn't happened in the past, but
Well,
I think that's
see, everything I was a part of that was, I mean, at least from the band perspective, was something that I never really had to worry about. And it was sort of interesting to me, like that you'd sort of encounter bands that I think that's just the way it is sort of like in every walk of life is that some people are in a band or they play sports with sort of the intent of getting laid.
yeah.
And I guess it's always been a part of rock and roll, but like from my experience in the 90s, it was particularly, and keep in mind, like when I was in my college years was during the AIDS era. And so So like when I was in my 18 to 25, like the fear of AIDS was very big part of our upbringing. So that kind of
Yeah.
like freewheel in the 90s in particular, I can only speak for Pavement.
Yes.
And I can actually speak for some of the other bands that we toured with that I never really saw or too much of that behavior. Although I'm sure that it went on, and then
Yeah.
but not in my own world, because like the guys that I was in bands with, you never even had to have any. Nobody would ever misbehave in that regard.
Yeah.
It was like the reason why you did it, the reason why you were in a band, the priority was make to make cool music
Yeah.
and feel like you were doing something hopefully kind of important, and it was sort of exciting. So just and and beer and whatever was just like, I mean, like there was just never a concern with us. I mean, like
Yeah.
any of us. And then of course, like um, I think if really sort of analyzed my role in Pavement, I think really that I appealed more to the drunken men in the audience than any women.
Yeah.
So that it was always interesting. Like I was always on the other side of the stage with Malcolmus. You look out on the crowd, and it was all like kind of dudes like me in front of me,
Totally.
and Canberg, the other Spiral Stairs, the other guitar player, and Malcolmus, like all the pretty girls were over in front of him, um, for fairly obvious reasons. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so, it's just I just never, I mean, I know that some bands, especially like sort of like in the '80s,
For
um,
sure.
and I mean, I know some of the bands um, that I would always cross paths with on tour. That like, I mean, I know like Urge Overkill. You ever hear that band?
Yeah.
3-piece band that was on Touch and Go. Like we
Hmm.
often somehow would always be on tour with them at the same time. They'd always kind of play similar type venues, especially in the UK and Europe. And so they'd be like a day ahead of us or a day behind us. Like so they'd always be in the same, a lot of cases, same very small hotel with us. And we'd come home at the same time, and they'd come home with the ladies because that was a priority to them, and we would just come home like just over lagered and it was just I mean it just I mean it doesn't blow my mind. It just seems like it's a thing. I was disheartened and disappointed by reading what I read about the Burger Records guys,
Totally.
because I don't know them, of course, and like I'm mostly unaware of their catalog, um, aside from a few things, obviously.
Hmm.
And I never really knew much about the guys. I found more out about the actual guys that run it last week than how long have they been around? Like 10
Like
years?
10 years. Yeah.
Okay, so it seemed to me like, judging by the interviews I read of them before there was any problem, that one thing that I found immediately disconcerting was their overwhelming adoration of Iggy Pop, uh,
Yeah.
who I know is a huge rock and roll hero to generations of punk fans and stuff. And um, he's never really made much appeal to me. This his whole style, and like I mean, no, like Mike Watt, like he was a hero of mine. Toured with him and stuff, played bass with him for several years,
Oh, cool.
and I mean, but Iggy Pop was just like one of these guys that just it's just like, to me, like just kind of creepy in a bad way. And like I don't never obviously never knew him personally. He's a completely different level of legend and stuff like that. And but I was never really interested in him. And like I've always found that like it just seemed to me like this is like, and I'm being very basic, and I don't really know these people. It's sort of unfair. I don't even know to what extent I I don't I don't know all the details. I just read
Totally.
basically Lucy Arnell told me, um, that this was going on. So I spent, an hour or two doing some research. But like reading the articles, they just seem like these kind of nerdy guys that like got into like being a record label and being a record store, and like they're like kind of a one in a million, like kind of lucky, like things fell into place for them, and they got to work with a lot of really talented artists, and things happen fast, and they kind of went from being like just these like nerds who thought they were cool because they like punk and other stuff to being like sort of like indie celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
And they, I mean, maybe it's one of these things where like they just saw an opportunity to take advantage of their overnight stardom in this sort of like ultra hipster Southern California music scene situation. And unfortunately, that resulted in some very, very horrible behavior. Horrible behavior. I
Totally.
mean, like, I don't know all the details, but from what I've heard, and there's lots of bands. There's lots of indie rock bands. It seems like from the last 10, 15 years that have gotten into trouble, and then like somebody like who came before them in the 90s, and in a lot of cases, um, Pavement in particular is often cited as an influence by a lot of these bands. And one thing that is unquestionably clear to me is that if we influence them, we only influence them musically. We certainly did not influence them from a behavioral
From
standpoint,
like culture and behavior, yeah.
leadership standpoint, or just being like just good, like just normal people who are like nice. I think that was one of sort of the keys to Pavement, is that just that kind of unassuming, like nice, kind of like just not being a dickhead or a
Yeah.
lunkhead, or not like thinking that you're really cool because you're in a band.
It
Um,
was really about the art and about,
I never really
performing.
cared about like. It was fun to be in a band. It was an exciting thing, and it was like it was amazing to get sort of unexpected recognition in a similar fashion to like anybody who has, and including your band. The fact that
Yeah.
you're playing sold out gigs at small venues around the country, and opening for bands playing bigger gigs. It's like you just consider yourself incredibly fortunate,
Yeah.
and there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with that, that you don't take that threshold and then screw it up, and then in a horrible and disgraceful manner ruin the lives of young people who like your music. That's just like
Totally.
why would you hurt your fans? Without
Yeah.
your fans, like, I mean, your fans are the ones that, especially in your case, um,
Are literally my life
yeah,
blood. Like
you know, like, don't bite the hands that feed you. Don't lick the hand that feeds you. It's like
yeah, totally.
it's just like it's just disappointing, because like I'd hate to think that people would be like, oh yeah, I'm sure they did that stuff too back then. Like,
Yeah.
so it's like, whereas a band like Yola Tango would be sort of safe. Like, um, our bands like the like a similar band to yours, like an all dude band like Pavement, they're probably like, well, God knows what they did.
Yep.
Well, not
And
nothing.
yeah,
In
exactly.
fact, some of my like friends from horse racing, which is a totally different world that is far more misogynist than music ever was,
Mm,
always like some people like actually they sort of have this idea that whatever I was doing in the 90s is a so-called like they think I was a rock star. They don't really realize that I'm an indie rock star. Or
yeah, yeah.
I was in a successful indie rock band or whatever. They don't understand the difference, okay? And like,
Yeah.
so they think that like I have this crazy whirlwind time in the 90s. It was all sex, drugs, and rock and roll, like Led Zepp or like, something like that. When in reality, it was mostly just beer and live shows and
Totally.
recording sessions. Like, not, and believe me, we had a great time.
Totally.
Like, I think it's just like, I just can't believe that people would seize the opportunity of being in a band to be a pervert, but perhaps like that they just would have been that way no matter what walk of life that they ended up in. So if they had been like really successful car dealers,
They would
that
have
they
been the
might have
same
done the
person.
same
Yeah.
thing, or if they'd been like, successfully were running like a marijuana dispensary or something
Yeah.
like that. So it's just like, who knows? I mean, like, I just feel terrible for all the artists and all the fans that have supported this label and really made these guys sort of successful. And
Hmm.
I'm not a lawyer, the whole like
Yeah.
innocent until proven guilty thing. And like, I will say that the initial ideas they came out with of like quickly wanting to turn it into like this all girl run label, that was like some sort of like almost like marijuana induced pipe dream that they were going to be able to set
Yeah.
themselves by like overnight turning themselves into a girl power outfit, sort of
Yeah.
off as particularly lame and low. No, obviously they're the kind of guys that I would call them front runners. When everything's going their way, they handle things pretty well. But when like all of a sudden the chips are not only down but really seriously down, they panic and start exposing themselves as horrible decision makers.
Yeah.
When what they should have done is just immediately fold up their tent and just go away and hope that if they do face criminal charges at some point, that their record sort of gets them out of doing serious time. But again, I don't know all the details.
Totally.
To me, it's just very, very disheartening and disappointing that somebody would take their threshold within something like indie rock and sort of like a miracle string of events working out and all kinds of artists, women and men sort of trusting them with their art and the whole time like doing horrible things.
Yeah. That's well. Okay, so to touch on something you said about like the '90s, I feel like the '90s were the last. I always say this: the '90s were like the last great decade, especially for music and like big budgets, like tour support. Like they could give you money to rent the van and stuff like that. All that's like completely gone.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, we never. Yeah, I mean, I
did you
remember.
did you guys feel that even on the indie level that there was just more money like labels could give you to tour and
No, I mean the only time that I really ever saw, you know, I mean the 2010 was completely different. But then there's no way to really compare because 2010 was just this sort of like a lot of bands do. They get back together and they made like Slint of all bands, a band like Slint who
yeah
essentially like a secretive organization, and they were the last band that I ever thought would like do a reunion tour. But then they not only did they do a reunion tour, but then they kind of like sort of carried on with more. And like in Pavement's case, our when Steven sort of consented to doing the reunion tour in 2010, it was just like a one-off. We weren't going
yeah
to like start being a band again because it was lucrative. It was just like there was a certain amount of demand for people that never really had a chance to see Pavement to see us essentially do like 25 to 30 more recognizable Pavement songs, and it was a lot of fun. And
yeah. I saw
but
you guys at the
back then, like
Hollywood
no,
Bowl.
because all of our deals were so straightforward. We had the same booking agent that sort of started at the same time as us, who's turned out to be an incredibly successful person. This guy named Dave Biacelli, who runs the Billions Corporation, is a very successful booking agent. And of course, Matador. Like Gerard had been around for a few years, but like I think we're the second or third band on Matador,
Hmm.
and the second band on Drag City after World Trucks. So it was just like, no, there wasn't any of that. And like, I mean, we'd been a band for several years, and we did the Lollapalooza thing. The previous year we were supposed to do it, and then Billy Corgan wouldn't do. He was a much bigger deal, so like he wouldn't play if Pavement was on the bill because he's such a
Such a cool guy.
easily sensitive, insecure, strange man.
Is that all because of that lyric? Which I noticed you guys didn't. Because I went to the Hollywood Bowl show and then noticed the lyric had changed in Range Life. Is
He
there?
changes every night,
Oh, okay.
and he just does that to entertain himself. Songs he's played
Oh,
at
okay.
times and stuff like that. But no, no, completely. I mean, the guy, it's ridiculous. It's not even worth talking about. And
Okay.
so we ended up doing the Lollapalooza in '95 because it was more like Sonic Youth we toured with several times in the early part of the '90s. We're friends with them, and Jesus Lizard. So a lot of the bands we knew really well, and we kind of when we were getting overpaid. I mean, like it was
Yeah.
crazy. And it was the first time we'd really sort of, on the occasional one-off, gotten like kind of overpaid. So, and it turned out to be like kind of a fail. Like most of the people, they sort of like a lot of people, they kind of overestimated our success. Like Pavement was really, especially in this country, was never really that big of a deal. Like we just had like really devoted supporters who would like in many cases go see a hit string of shows in a row. I'm sure you've had that in your band, like people that are just
Yeah.
hardcore that go see like 3 or 4 nights in a row.
Yeah, the people who love us, you know.
Yeah, no, it's great. So it's
Yeah.
your experience is very similar to ours.
Yeah.
And but then we were way bigger in the UK and Europe than here,
Okay.
which makes sense. I mean, like obviously many of our influences, we had more sort of influences in there were UK bands from the '70s and '80s than obviously like the early stuff would be, The Fall and Swell Maps and Wire and stuff like that. So legendary stuff. So and then of course the British in general, they sort of like embraced this as their own because they thought that the band was called Pavement because that's sort of what in America they call what we call a sidewalk, they call pavement.
Mm.
So they just like, and we loved so many UK bands from the '70s and '80s that were huge influences on us as teenagers. So we were very successful in England and Germany and Holland and then did quite well in Australia and Japan, which is fantastic. It was just a wonderful journey. Like, but at the same
Yeah.
time, like, the U.S. was sort of interesting. Like, some places, like we wouldn't draw at all. I'm sure you experienced this too.
Yeah, you have your good nights and your off nights and
Yeah, same kind of
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, obviously, like we were from Stockton, so San Francisco, like, kind of thought that treated us like a Bay Area band,
Mhm.
which was kind of nice. But I remember Gary when he was in the band. We actually got, I think it was in '90. Yeah, it was '92. The year Slayton and Shannon came out. It was the only time that Pavement actually won a major musical award.
Oh,
Won the BAMI, which is the Bay Area Grammy
there you
for
go.
for best alternative album for Slayton and Shannon, and none of us wanted to go because it just seemed like a brutal thing to do. But like Gary wanted to go because he'd never won anything, and he'd been in bands for like 27 years. So he and his wife went, and Gary, of course, got bombed because he would drink like 20 vodka grapefruits a day, drink like a half gallon of vodka a day, and routinely. And I'm afraid he still does. But
Oh.
although I only talk to him once every 3 years, maybe. But so he got bombed, but then so like, and he didn't know he was going to win. He was just like on the nominee. He didn't know any of the other bands. That was one of the great things about Gary. He was always just completely. Whereas we thought we knew what was going on. Like Gary was
Mhm.
just completely. He had like no. He thought because like we were on the cover of indie rock magazines that we must be making. He was delusional. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's like we must be far more successful than we were. But so he would. So they some guy comes up to him like 30 seconds before and says, "Hey, buddy, you won." Okay, and like so then like they announced the award, best alternative rock record from the Bay Area, even though Stockton is definitely not in the Bay Area. And Gary went, so Gary's got to go up there and he's absolutely bombed. And he's a very small man, and the guy that was giving him the award was the famous saxophone player Clarence Clements, who's
Oh.
like his hands are like massive, and like Gary.
Yeah.
And I wish I could have been there to see it, but like Gary was too incoherent to make any speech. He just like held up the trophy. He's obviously bombed, and he said, "Thank you very much," and just like walked off the stage. And like his wife had a great night. It was a great night for them because like they're just they live in the middle of nowhere out in Linden, California, outside of Stockton. So went to San Francisco, and Gary came home with some sort of trophy that I've never even seen. It was crazy, but yeah, that would be it. That was
That's
it.
crazy. Yeah,
Yeah,
so you guys are going to come back next year, right?
I am.
That was the plan.
There's a lot of issues with that. I mean, obviously the concerts are in Europe. And who would,
Yes.
even in January of this year, Ruben, do you think I'd be able to make a statement like this to you? And even in
Yeah.
January and February of this year, Ruben, at some point in your life as an American citizen, your passport is worthless and you'll only be able to go freely enter 4 other countries in the world.
I know.
I mean, it's just
Insane.
mind. So at this point, obviously, the Primavera Sound thing we're supposed to do this year then got pushed back to Labor Day weekend, and I was very concerned about that because I talked to our booking agent, and he said, you know, these people are really determined to get this to happen, and I was like, whoa, amazing. So like it might actually happen. This is like 2 months ago, and he said, yeah, like depending on how they're doing with the COVID-19, it might actually happen. And I said, wow, that's crazy. He said, well, my big concern is that, and he had a tremendous amount of foresight. This might have even been more like 60 to 90 days ago. He said, I'm really concerned that they won't let Americans in.
Mm.
And that I'm sure affected their decision that I would say at least half the bill comes from US and UK. And does every year, if not more.
Yeah.
So at this point, if there is a window early in the year next year, then I would say in order to do these 2 concerts that are currently scheduled in June, that Pavement, if given a window to leave this country for 60 to 90 days, might relocate to Canada or the UK or some part of Europe. So when the time comes, we can access these shows as opposed to sitting here in this country and not being able to leave the country.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'd say that the shows are so important to us, especially postponed 1 year, and we want to do it and ideally sort of move on to the next thing, which if it is a successful venture and we feel good about it, that we may do a bit of touring that's completely undefined the following year. And there is, of course, the qualifier that it needs to be a good experience. So,
yeah.
So at this point, yeah, it's very important that for us, I mean, speaking just for us and anybody that cares about Pavement, that we can get out of our country and play these 2 shows. I mean,
Yeah. And when you say a good experience, you guys have been so close for so long. You're kind of like brothers. Is it kind of like that where you guys kind of get on each other's nerves if it's taking too long? Like, but it's all in good love, like
I think
brothers.
it's about this. I think it all comes down. I think really the other 4 members of Pavement are basically willing to put down whatever they're doing to do Pavement at any time. And cool. And Steven's situation is different. He's got all the different solo projects. He's got the Chicks. He's got there's always a lot on his plate. So it all really comes down to him and if he wants to do it. So anybody that sort of thinks like, oh, why doesn't Pavement do more? It's just we would, but it's just when Steven decides that it's what he wants to do. Because whereas Pavement can technically play shows without me or a guy replacing Steve West or whatever, just like you and Dante Elephante, I'm telling you, a Dante Elephante gig without Ruben is just it's not worth attending. Okay.
Yeah.
The same thing can be said of Malcolmus. Like, whereas you can get any turd back there to pound the skins. Okay. True. So basically, it's called me and Steve West turds.
You guys are the best turds.
We're nice turds.
Yeah, the best, nicest turds.
Very harmless. No, who knows? I mean, yeah. So when I use that language, it means hopefully he has a good time. Then he'll want to do more.
Yeah. And when speaking of the turds, the percussion, I started on drums too. That was like the first thing I learned. How much syncing is there? Like when you guys are practicing, like together.
We never practice. We just practice for normally. Even in 2010, I think we probably practiced for about 6 to 8 hours, which is enough because we played the songs. And really the biggest concern about that year is that when you do these reunion things, like, so basically when you guys do a headlining set, how long do you play? You play like about 15 songs and maybe an encore, like 18,
Yeah, like a 45 to an hour set.
Hour set. So if you're the headliner, you play for an hour, then you do like maybe an encore if you want.
If they want it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Same. So like when Pavement was around, we played for 60, 70 minutes because I always made the set list.
Oh,
So
really?
we would play for 60, 70 minutes. And then like if we weren't awful or even if we were awful, they would usually have us come back out. So then like they could sort of like heckle us or whatever. Um, so yeah, but one thing about the reunion situation is that they kind of want it to be like closer to 2 hours long.
Ooh,
So the big concern was really more, and of course back then I was in 2010 I was 42, and fitness was the issue because I don't know
hmm
how many 2 hour shows you played, but like
several.
oh really? It's like
Like at breweries, you know.
oh yeah okay yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've never really done that before, and like I'm pretty out of
It
shape
sucks.
in general. Like I'm not a healthy guy. I mean, I'm not unhealthy, but I'm not a
Yeah,
fit.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
They're
uh,
brutal. They're not fun. They're just kind of like, oh my
no,
god,
they're
we're still
and
playing.
well, no, what you're describing sounds awful, but like,
Oh yeah, what I
yeah, brewery gig, Jesus.
yeah, brutal. They give you like 200
That and
bucks
playing
and
Don't
you're
Stop Believing It at Santa Barbara weddings. I don't know how. Like, I mean,
it's tough. That's why you like that's why you have to leave
it's
Santa
tough.
Barbara, which is it's tough.
It's a
Like you
lot
want
better than most jobs, but at the same time,
oh
like,
yeah.
it is there is a demoralizing aspect.
Well, that's why you want to leave Santa Barbara, see what the other scenes are like, and then you come back and you're like, okay, this is a fucking vacation town. Like
Yeah, gets you
I'll
out of
calm
town.
down. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you were born there too, right?
I know. Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
I'm in the
Your
bubble.
parents, are they still there? Your parents?
Yeah,
Oh, cool. How often do you see them?
all the time. Actually, yeah.
Okay, cool. So like that hasn't really affected your 2020 then, like that.
No, I still see them all the time. My parents are your age. They had kids
Yeah,
really young. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
My
Yeah.
mother now. See, my mother, she's been on lockdown the entire year. She lives in
Oh.
an independent living facility in Richmond, Virginia, and she's 83, and she's doing fine. I talk to her all the time. She's a very interesting person,
Yeah.
extremely progressive minded, and always has been, and it's a wonderful person to talk politics with. She's still
Oh,
razor
nice.
sharp at 83. I mean, um, it's incredible, really. But and of course, her mind is blown,
Yeah.
just blown, and so it is. Her viewpoints are always really interesting and spot on. But
Mm.
she's really razor sharp. But she's one of those people, thank God, that never gets bored. But even my sister and her kids, they only live like they're close, like you are to your parents, only like a handful of miles away. And up until like even like maybe about 30 days ago, for the first time, she was just allowed to go out and see my sister once or twice a week, and she can't
Mm.
do any spend the nights. And like when I go to Richmond, I stay with my mom. My mom's got this
Mm.
awesome, is this really cool, nice 2 bedroom apartment, and I have a
That's cool.
blast when I visit her. And one thing I've noticed about myself personally is that, um, I'm in my early 50s, and I realized that I was completely born out of time when I visit this place in Richmond. It's called Westminster Canterbury, and there's the I'd say the average age of the women there is like 85, and
Mm.
I noticed going. My mother lives on the 8th floor, like going in and out of the place. It's like that the um, women in that age group are the first age group that I've ever encountered that sort of find me attractive. So I really sort of enjoy that. Like I find myself going up and down the elevator, like getting, and I'm just kidding about that aspect, but like women are just like, oh, what a handsome young man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never felt that way. So I finally realized that if I was born in like 1937 instead of 1967, which of course would have been impossible because my mother would have been one, then I actually would have been like hot, or like
Yeah. Totally.
instead I've always just had to adopt the policy, like, I'm not that pathetic, but you know what I mean?
But to go back
It's,
on
it's fun. It's
to
fun to
go
get
back.
flirted with by 80-year-old women, 80-year-old women.
Yeah.
It's a subject
To-
that you probably have to put much thought into.
I did work at a retirement home once.
Yeah, oh, yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
and they're very sweet. But I wanted to go back to the set list and playing. So, did you make the set list for the reunion shows in 2010?
Yeah. But keep in mind, like, we only learned how to play like 40 songs and have to slap like 28 on a night. So it was
Wow.
rather easy.
Yeah, it was a lot like from Quarantine the Past. the
Yeah,
greatest hits. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
We just played. There's 40 songs. It was actually like I think we could have been more adventurous in our choices. And I think that next year's shows will be sort of similar to that vibe because they're whatever big festival
Big
gigs.
shows. Yeah.
But I'd say if we do some stuff beyond that, that we would definitely make it quite a bit more adventurous and not put pavement enthusiasts through having to hear the 1100th rendition of like "Cut Your Hair."
Yeah, totally.
Although you never know. They're like, who knows? It's basically whatever they
Well,
want to play. But I think it would be really great to actually play. There's at least 25, 20 songs, pavement songs that I got to let the dog in that we never played live because we tried to play them live and the versions were so awful. So I think we should sort of embrace that challenge to at least have like a half dozen songs on the list that we've never played before live. Hold on,
yeah.
I'll show you the corgi.
Okay.
Come on, guys. Let me show him to you, Ruben. He's quite an individual. He's just about to turn 7. This guy. This guy.
Oh, so sweet.
Yeah, that's Mr. Ghost.
Oh, nice. So cute.
He's a great dog.
How old is he?
He'll be 7 in October.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's a cardigan Welsh corgi. Most people come up to me and they're like, "That's not a corgi," and I'm like, "Yeah, it is."
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
They're more familiar with the Pembroke, and like the cardigans have tails and they're bushier and they're bigger. He's a very big corgi.
Oh, that's awesome.
Big ego, massive. His life is an eternal search for comfort, and he's winning.
Yeah, that's also my search for eternal comfort.
It could have something to do with the fact that we've spoiled our 4-legged children.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool, pulling out some deep cuts, but I still think there will be people who want to hear "Cut Your Hair,"
Well, yeah, I mean, it kind of depends, but like,
that balance of the hits and the deep cuts.
Yeah, I think there's both. I think there's people that want to hear deep cuts.
Yep.
They want to
sure.
They want to be there the first time that we sort of like completely destroy any number of pavement songs we've never played live. And
yeah,
I imagine that it could be quite risky. But some songs are just terrible live. Like "Carrot Rope" was awful live.
I was just about to bring that up. That was actually the first pavement song I heard, and I worked my way backwards.
Sorry about that. I never really liked it very often. I never liked that. Never really liked "Rattled by the Rush."
Oh, I remember Steven dedicated that one to Matt Leinart at the Hollywood Bowl.
That was appropriate.
2010,
I forgot about Matt Leinart.
I was the only one laughing at that joke. I was like, oh, yeah, I don't think a lot of people watch football in this audience.
The only time I ever met Matt Leinart was at some weird alternative rock event. I tried to use his head as the cue ball, and then I realized that it was way too big for that. But I wonder how the old Leinart Meister's doing these days.
I don't know. A lot of those USC quarterbacks really like Matt Barkley, Leinart.
Leinert's doing great. He's doing great. I'm sure he's some analyst. He's just an analyst.
Yeah, probably. Are you guys all San Francisco 49er fans, being from Stockton?
Rattled by the Rush, man. He's really clever. The Niners. No, I don't think anybody roots for the Niners. I don't think really anybody has a favorite NFL team. I think that Steven is a really, really good and competitive fantasy sports person.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's particularly good at the NBA and baseball. And I think of course, there's been this renaissance of Virginia college basketball that we're and we're huge fans of that. Just me and Steve. And Steve West doesn't care at all about sports. Hamburg is a huge Oakland A's fan.
Okay.
Because of Stockton.
Yeah.
And he's very Stockton. He's not there now, but like he is the Stockton. His parents had like the original address on the back of like our early records, and like they dealt with all the mail and stuff. But But yeah, but Malcolmus is one of those guys that kind of roots for like different teams every year based on like who he thinks is cool on the team. But I'd say his strongest opinions would be of NBA players.
Mm,
He's a big NBA enthusiast. He loves the NBA. And he's one of his best friends, or one of his good friends, is this guy who writes for the NBA. But he used to write for Roto World, that fantasy sports website.
mm-hmm.
Obviously, don't. I'm speaking Greek to you now.
No, that's fine. I love sports. That's what I
Okay.
looked up
So
the
what are your
Pavement.
teams? What are your teams?
I like the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay, I see. I used to be a Raiders fan, but then when they moved to LA, that put me off when I was a
Oh
kid.
yeah.
Back in like the Marv Hubbard and the Mark Van Egan era, because they both went. My dad was a football star at Colgate, and both of those guys went to Colgate,
Mm,
and you know they had so much character, those Oakland Raiders teams, and
totally.
you know I mean there's times that but then and then there's I try well actually if I had to say my favorite NFL team right now by far is the Tennessee Titans because I some of my friends are season ticket holders and like and they're just great. Actually, the drummer for Silver Jews, Brian Kotzer, who's actually in this really cool band now that just put out a good record on Fat Possum called Country
Mm,
Westerns.
mm,
And Kotzer is like one of the biggest Titans fans of all time. And one of my oldest friends is a comedian named Kevin Guthrie. He's an artist now, um, like visual art. He does like pastels of athletes on um, 12 pack beer cartons. It's
oh,
actually
cool.
pretty interesting. He actually does well, and he's good. They're sick Titans fans. I like the Titans. I tend to root for teams that my friends just to make them happy, but I do actually like the Titans. I was excited by
Yeah, they gave a shout out to David, didn't they?
yeah, they lost to the Chiefs. They were ahead at halftime,
Yeah.
and then reality set in. But yeah,
Yeah.
and then like you know, I grew up a Knicks fan, so it's very painful that aspect. I do love.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Malcolm Brogdon fan. I was very disappointed when he got traded from the Milwaukee Bucks to the Indiana Pacers.
Mm.
Although I like the Pacers fine, it's just that I don't think I'd like to be amongst their fans.
Have you watched any of these games in the bubble?
I can't watch the bubble because,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess I'll probably when it gets down to the finals or stuff, I'll tune in. But
Yeah.
the main reason is I just can't. I've been a basketball fan for so long, mostly of college and also the NBA. Okay, and I just I the only basketball I can possibly handle in the summertime would be like a good Olympic. Like it just
Mm.
doesn't make sense in the summertime to me. It seems like summer league. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
But the
And
only
with no
and the fact
fans in the
that
audience, it really does look like summer league.
yeah, and the fact that there's never a fresh start.
Yeah.
You know, like you can't just pick up where you were in a season. So like the only thing that's really working for me right now is the usual and the mainstay, which is UK and Irish racing, horse racing, which I get
Got
up.
it. Yeah. Yeah, because they didn't really stop horse racing.
They stopped. They stopped
They
for like
did?
60 to 90 days. US racing didn't stop.
Okay.
But keep in mind, the state I live in, the state of Iowa, never stopped either.
Because you can gamble in Iowa.
well, our governor's a woman named Kim Reynolds who's up Trump's skirt.
Oh, I see.
So Iowa never shut down.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
is the
sports
commander. He is
sports
her
gambling.
commander.
Wait,
It's
what happened?
terrifying. It's pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, baseball. I hope that baseball, since it's not bubbled and there's a different outbreak story every day. I'm a lifelong hardcore Pittsburgh Pirates fan, and I was
Oh
wondering,
yeah, go Pirates.
I think that we'll be all out to win 10 out of 60 games. I think that what we're doing is using this 60 game season to sort of test out 40 or 50 guys that play for the Pirates, sort of figure out their worth going forward during like a real. So I think we are in that category of teams like the Royals and the Tigers and a few other teams that figured there's no way they're going to make the top 16.
Yeah.
So let's just like use this as like, since baseball is real now, it's not spring training. We use this sort of as a testing ground for all of our arms and all of our young players, especially, and then the veterans, and figure out in the off season. It'd be very interesting for me to see, like, if there is an 162 game season next year. I'd like to think that there will be, and that all the baseball before the All Star break will be played in a similar fashion as this. Then hopefully later in the year after the All Star break, the fans will return,
Mm,
which will make for this. It'll just be so great for baseball fans.
totally.
And I think that I mean the 60 game season doesn't bother me if they can pull it off, because it's just that it's a different thing. So I will actually, whoever wins the World Series this year, I will actually call a World Series winner, because it's just a different kind of competition. It's like a
Yeah.
condensed 60 games. It's like a different. It's a baseball tournament from day one. I just think it's pretty fascinating, and it just makes sense to me in the summertime. Just like horse racing is a year-round thing, and it's marginalized. Most people don't really care about that. I didn't give a hoot about car racing. Can't stand it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then hockey, like one of my best friends, Gary Smith, played in the NHL. He's 76 now, played in the NHL for 18 years. He was a fantastic goalie. His nickname was Suitcase because he played for so many different teams. He got traded a lot.
Mm,
So it's fun to like watch hockey with him, but I don't really watch hockey on a regular basis anymore.
totally. I got into hockey for a little bit. I was like, "Oh, this is awesome!" And the Kings were really like the Kings
Yeah,
were
they were
winning.
good for a while.
I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, okay. Well, maybe I like hockey now," and that just fell off.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite baseball team?
No, baseball's the one I never got into. It's mostly football. I played football in high school, and
Oh,
then
you did.
yeah,
You did, yeah.
yeah, and then basketball too. But I don't really have an allegiance to a team in basketball. I kind of just I like the
Yeah.
Lakers. My dad's a Bulls fan, so maybe I'll watch a game with him.
They're too. Yeah, they're pretty bad. Uh,
Yeah, there's a little bit of hope
the
with Derrick
Lakers, like,
Rose.
I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, I think they. I mean, they're probably. How could they not win it all? But you never know. I mean, like
Yeah,
there's a handful of good teams in the league. It's just so unusual. It just doesn't make. To me, it's like a complete throwout. Whatever
yeah.
they do, I just hope nobody gets like a career-ending injury and nobody gets a bad case of COVID-19. Because the thing is, like with NBA players in particular, is that I think by nature, a lot of the athletes in the NBA, even though we think of them as the world's greatest athlete,
Hmm.
is that a lot of them, for lack of a better term, are freakishly talented athletes. And like, you hear all the every not a year goes by, and especially in the NBA or college sports, where like a lot of these guys have unusual heart conditions, premature heart conditions, and things like that. So they're whereas we think of them as just these incredible athletes who like can just do such a mind blowing things with their
Hmm.
bodies on the basketball court. There's a certain amount of susceptibility in being like
Six,
six
seven.
eleven.
Yeah, six
Yeah,
eleven. Yeah,
right. Exactly. I'm just like just the way your body's made. Like it sort of makes sense. Like if there's a certain amount of logic to it. So obviously, I hope none of these people, especially when they really kick it up a gear and start trying really hard, that they get hurt. That would be a shame and sort of like a
yeah.
throw out NBA season. But also like the thing that terrifies me the most about COVID-19, in addition to being a diabetic and the fact that if I get a bad case of it, I definitely die, is that one thing we're not talking about, because we're very much in the present with COVID-19, is the people, whether they be your age or my age or older or younger, in fact,
Hmm.
that have a bad case of COVID-19 that they survive significantly affect their lives. And we don't really know, there isn't much of a discussion in this country on the out of pocket expense of people that get a bad case of COVID-19. And
Yeah.
I'm surprised that hasn't been on like 60 Minutes or something like that. Like, you know, she was on a vent for 8 days and now she has to go through 11 months of physical rehab. Here's the bill for Sandra
Yeah.
Daniels from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I mean, like the expenses has to be almighty. And like,
I saw
and
something on Twitter. This guy had to pay like 4 million, and he was in
yeah,
there
it's
for a week
crazy.
on a ventilator.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's just crazy. So like,
Yeah.
who knows? I mean, I'm not going to get there. I mean, like, there's no need to really get overtly political, but really, I mean,
Totally.
November 3rd is just going to be quite a day, and what happens afterwards? I mean, like, if a guy like Biden, he becomes the president, what he's going to inherit is just going to be so mind blowing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, talk about a bad position to be in. It's going to be the worst office to inherit in history. We're completely unaware of 99% of the damage that's been done. I
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, God knows. I mean,
Yeah.
so. I mean, it's fairly obvious that I want the incumbent out. Um, but at the same time, like it might be pretty easy to get the next guy out, or for the GOP to win whatever they want back, because there's going to be it'll be quite easy to blame what's going on in the country on the current administration.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like this administration economically rode the coattails of a successful economy
Yeah.
and took credit for it. Now they've completely destroyed this economy. Destroyed this could be destroyed for like decades,
Yeah.
all because of like the main reason being would be out of fear of the Dow Jones Industrial Average being affected by a global pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, how poison is that? How far have we gone in the greed department? I mean, like, it's just nuts. But that's enough about that.
Well,
Everybody knows where I stand, Dante. But anyways, I guess I kind of have to wrap it up here because
okay, cool.
I got to make dinner. But yeah, any other? Obviously, I've taken up a lot of your time by interviewing. You've been really great. It's been really great to have you on your show.
No, yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you. I have a couple questions, but you know what? We answered most of them in a natural way where I didn't have to set up. I've realized that with a lot of musicians, like, I think it's the way we get interviewed typically. They kind of just look at you like, you got another question, but you've done such a good job at just like talking. I'm like, oh, thank God. He
Yeah,
likes to talk. Oh, thank God.
yeah. Well, keep in mind, like you talk to a lot of musicians. I'm not a musician.
Yeah.
I'm a dude who was in a band.
Yeah, that's true.
Very lucky. Like of all the people in the world, if you'd known me when I was 21 and you'd see me at like 60, we were the same age. You saw me at every show that you went to, and you'd be like, "Oh, there, that guy's great." Like, he's always at all the shows, and buys merch, and buys records like that. You would be like, "I never thought that guy would be in a band." I'm that guy. Like, it's like
Yeah.
I'm that guy that just and I think that I did. I think I did a good job, but it's just so like to my parents, we're just like, "You're in a what? Like you're going to England to play shows? Like we've never seen you play music in your life, other than records,
Yeah.
So, and so that was a huge challenge. But I relished it. I loved it. And it was so exciting for me, but a lot of it was just like total nervous energy,
Yeah.
and
Well,
fear and fear.
yeah. Well, I'll leave you with one final moment here. When I was overly refreshed once, I got a pavement tattoo.
Oh, no way. What is that?
It says pavement.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Fantastic.
I was
Yeah,
very overly refreshed.
Pleasure to talk to you about,
Yeah,
pavement.
man. It was awesome.
It was a wonderful experience, and I look forward to doing it again. And hopefully, you said you saw us at the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh yeah, and I'll come to the next show whenever it happens.
Yeah, we'll let you know. And
Yeah.
don't pay some exorbitant ticket price. Just shoot me an email, and I'll get
Awesome.
you and at least you in.
Oh yeah, I'll take it.
Sometimes like big cities like that, it's like it's hard to get the +1 thing.
Yeah, totally.
Because you got to put like all kinds of like your late however it works. Like
Yeah, the people gotta.
becomes this thing. It's like so then you look around your backstage and there's all these people that somebody in the know is telling you that's on like a TV show, and you're like, well, what are they doing at a pavement show? And it's like, oh, their publicist told them to show up just to take for photo ops.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, it's like.
I'm like, okay, like so they're. It's weird, but yeah, I will say this. There is one. I don't know if you're aware of it. You probably are as a sports fan and as an NFL.
Yeah.
Are you aware of Mina Kimes?
Oh no.
Mina Kimes, the ESPN. She does the NFL stuff for ESPN.
Oh, maybe if I saw her face. I know their faces really well.
So she lives like not far from you. She lives somewhere in LA.
Oh, cool.
A bunch of brokers tip stuff. Oh, by the way, if you do want to check out my record label, we're
Yeah.
putting out new releases. We've got a really great band from San Francisco called C Night, and we're putting out a band from Baltimore I like called Quattrocenta, and then we're putting out this buddy of mine, MG Clark, who makes really kind of weird instrumental stuff from Denver,
Cool.
and then the Australian pop star Holiday Sidewinder. We're putting out her.
Awesome.
That's coming out before the end of the year. The
All
first
their 7 inches?
and you can get it all. Yep, all 7 inches and brokerstiprecords.com. And we've got T-shirts now and a few hats. And before I put out, when I'm done this year, I think it'll be 10 records in the last like 3 or 4 years. So I like to do like a clip of 2 or 3 a year, and like people send me stuff, and I find it very hard to say no, but I have to. And like generally the way it works is that I meet the people and I sort of approach them and ask them to hear their music, you know. So, but it's fun. It's tiny, you know. I mean, like I just went to the post office and sent off 8 packages. Like we're lucky to get like in a great week we get like 3 or 4 orders a week, you know. And we do a lot of international business, which is cool. But the website just started. It's been really fun. It's just nice. It's fun to do. I really enjoy it. So yeah, check us out at Broker's Tip. Let me show you. Show you shirt. Yeah, there's our shirt and our logo.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I'll mail you one of these actually.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Do you like that lime on maroon? I like that lime on maroon.
Yeah, I like it. It's cool.
Yeah, and you can't tell if it's a record store or a record label. I should probably put the website on there. These are the marketing things.
No, people.
From Ruben from Dante Elephante. No. So, anyways, great talking to you, man. I'll look forward to meeting in person, man. Thanks for getting in touch with me, and I'll be happy whenever you're one of those. I live in Des Moines. You know, I work, you know, but I usually work 70 hours a week, and this year I'm only working 25 hours a week. So if you're in one of those situations where you have a guest cancel, then shoot me a text. Maybe I'll come on.
Yeah.
Talk to you about, you know, soups and stews or growing tomatoes or, you know, dog walking or whatever. But anyways, have a great night, bud.
Hey, man. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, good luck with everything, man.
Thanks,
Stay in
man.
touch. Let me know if you need anything.
Okay, I will. Thanks, man.
Have a great night, brother.
You too.